My name's Keith. This is Heather. We work for Natural Wellness Solutions. We're holistic wellness practitioners. And so we work with brain patterns. So, in that, today we have a pretty good topic.
We do. This one is targeted more towards moms. I'm not sure. Moms, let me know. Mom. Have you ever felt really lost? I know personally that when I became a mom, I felt like I lost who I was almost. I didn't know who I was. My identity became something so completely foreign that I didn't know who Heather was anymore. I was just mom. I wasn't even really wife.
Yeah.
I was just mom. And today we have a lot of thoughts on that topic that we would really like to expound on.
Yeah. I think when things change in life, especially when there's growth, somebody else comes into our life where we have that expectation, we feel like rather than us growing into that from who we are, we grow into that through expectation. And so it's like, what role do I have to play to be this? What do I have to imitate to be this? Rather than who do I have to actually grow into from where I'm at to be that person? So it's not an imitation. It's more an authentic version of ourselves growing into that rather than an imitation of somebody else to fulfill an obligation that we think we're supposed to do or who we think we're supposed to be.
You know, I remember when we brought our oldest home from the hospital, and Keith looked at me and he goes, "They're actually going to send us home with him? There's no instruction manual." And I look back at that, 11 years ago, and I think when we go to a job, they have a list of criteria of who we're supposed to be, what our identity almost.
Your job title and your obligations, responsibilities.
Yeah, as an employee of that company. But when you become a mom, even a dad, but primarily a mom, since we have that maternal role, there's no rule book. There's no nothing. You're winging it. And then once you figure it out, or you think you have it figured out with your first kid, along comes your second kid, and they are nothing like your first. They throw you for a loop, and you don't know how to parent them. You don't know how to discipline them. You don't know how, what routines work for them.
Yep.
So you just kind of feel like in this perpetual spiral of where did I go? Where did I go wrong? Where's the rule book to teach me how to do this?
Right, and a lot of the rule books that we see, on things like parenting, are full of obligations and really just roles that we think we need to imitate, or content that movies, TV shows, whatever it is, that's our environmental diet or visual diet right there that we consume, that gives us a role that we're just imitating. There really is nothing that we're given. So really understanding ourselves better to be able to grow into that as us and not an imitation, I think, is important.
And I think that when you mention that too, there are so many different perspectives of what a parent should do. If you read, there's thousands of parenting books out there. Even if you stick to if you want to take the Bible even, or different methods of parenting, they all have a different interpretation. So as parents, you get advice from other people, and you try I know that I found, when I was a first-time mom, I found so many people giving unsolicited advice as to how I should parent. And this part of me was like, well, I've never done this before. They've done this, so clearly they know what they're doing, even though
right. Some people do, some people don't, and
right.
Only time tells.
But I think that as moms, we try and form our identity into what other people think that we should do for our kids, and then we feel like we're failing them, and then we feel lost, and then we feel like we're detached or unanchored, because there's so many different opinions being thrown at us and so many different right and wrong ways to raise your kids, like do's and don'ts, yeses and nos, and personality types of children. And I think that there's so much out there that we don't feel grounded. We don't feel, and maybe that's not even the right word.
Well, I think you were right with the you feel unanchored or detached. I think you're on the right path there with saying that, because if you didn't grow, if you're not growing into this person, if that isn't who you are, and you detach yourself from who you are, or you unanchor yourself from who you are, and you try and play this role over here on somebody else's belief system. Because what's a belief? You have something that comes into your life that triggers a thought. That thought, you put meaning to that thought, right? And this goes through this whole cycle where that's your belief system. But you can get unanchored or detached because now you're using somebody else's belief system. You're using somebody else's thought process that you might not understand, because your belief systems are from your perspective that is unique to you. And so if you're using what's unique to somebody else and their background and their upbringing and what they've done, but it's so far away or detached or unanchored from yourself and who you are, for sure you can feel completely detached, and you can feel unanchored, or like you're just drifting through it without control. So I think that's a really good point, is that feeling detached, feeling unanchored.
It brings me to another thought too. Keith and I were having a conversation the other day regarding like alignment. And when I think of alignment, I think of a car. If you take your car and you get new tires to get realigned. And if you bring that into this world of parenting and being a mom and who you are, I think that we have this sense of self as moms. And I think that we have an idea of what we want to be like as a mom, whether we had a great role model growing up as a mom, whether our mom is our role model and our best friend, or whether we had this mom who gave us the idea of the exact opposite of what we wanted to become. We have this picture in our mind of what we align with as to who we want to be. And I think that's where a lot of moms feel like they're failing, because the alignment of what they see in their minds is not the reality that they're living. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I kind of define alignment as the person that you are, the person that you're becoming, your journey through life, your idea of who you are, your identity, your characteristics, your personality, everything that makes you you, is aligned with the actions that you take. And so if you're taking somebody else's version of you, or what you perceive other people think of you, this idea of pluralistic ignorance, where I think so and so needs me to be this, so I'll take these actions to appease them and be something like a people pleaser. That pulls you out of alignment, because it's not who you are, it's who somebody else expects or wants you to be. And so you do it their way. You're kind of allowing them to control your actions, and that doesn't align with who you are, who you're becoming, and that path that you're already on. So you get to a place where it's hard to achieve goals. You feel like you're setting yourself aside because other people are more important, and it feels selfless in the moment. But long term, it's not necessarily a selfless endeavor. It was selfish in the moment to feel comfortable now, when you're making it very uncomfortable later.
You just said something about like being a parent or being a mom. There's this idea of like, when you're a people pleaser type personality, I don't even necessarily think that it's people pleasers. I think that innately we want to be liked.
Right.
And when you're a mom, you have to make choices that your kids don't like. And I think that because I don't remember the exact verbiage that you just used, but it was beautifully said on how we want other people, we want the decisions that we make to be decisions that other people like.
Mm-hmm.
And because as humans, right, if we're not liked, survival tells us that if we aren't liked by the people around us, like find your tribe and love them hard, I know that you've heard that phrase before. If your tribe doesn't like you, you get outcast.
Mm-hmm.
Well, your children become part of your tribe. So I think, I know personally, I've struggled with this too, of being the disciplinarian parent that I need to be because my children need correction and guidance and discipline. But oftentimes, and those come with boundaries, and those come with me having to make incredibly difficult choices that my kids don't like. And then I have this survival that goes, oh no, if my kids don't like me, are they going to kick me out of the tribe? So then you go through this almost like this spiral, this crazy tornado in your head of, well, if they don't like me, I don't want to get outcast, but I have to be their mom, and I have to love and guide them and discipline them and rear them so that they can become good humans in the world. But how do I do that if I'm not their friend?
Right.
And it creates this, like, this is who I have to be their mom. But it feels survivally instinct, almost wrong, because they're not going to like me.
Right. And I think that's part of understanding your role. And even in friend groups, or you had mentioned the tribe. You don't want to be outcast.
Find your tribe and love them hard. Yep. Otherwise you might be outcast.
Understanding your role there. Also, when you do have a tribe, you understand other people's role and you place them accordingly. But understanding your role there, and your role is to be nurturing, is to grow them into something that bears good fruit, right? And in order to do that, it might feel wrong to weed the garden because you're killing a plant for the betterment of the ones that you want to grow. And so when you're weeding a garden, sometimes it can feel like you're destroying things when really you're cultivating that into proper growth. And so understanding your role of nurturing is important, and how you would grow into nurturing, not how this gardener over here grows into nurturing, like how you would grow into nurturing. I think that's an important part of it, is really knowing your role.
And I think that putting almost an authentic thumb, like, you have your green thumb when you're gardening.
Yep.
Like putting your own authentic version of parenting, of that maternal nurturing role into your parenting, because how I parent is not going to be the same as how you parent, because you and I are completely different authentically, right?
And that doesn't negate, though, that you can't learn from other people.
Absolutely.
So taking the gardening thing, it's not that you can't learn from other people and bring it into nurturing what you have, but we're saying that imitating the role of them, or exactly how they would do it, because that is quote unquote the right way, might be misaligning you and the direction that you want to take it, and the direction that you need to take it, what it grows into, it, how it flourishes. Because doing all that, you will make mistakes along the way, but there are things that you will learn from, and we are all in this human experience together. And in that, we are all learning from our mistakes, from our perspective, from how we see thoughts. But what we're doing here is, when you have this thought come in, we're just showing you that the meaning that you're placing on it right now, that you feel lost and you feel so far off the path that you would have taken, you can change the meaning to that. You can change that meaning that fits who you are better. So then it completes this cycle that creates our identity, that creates these systems of thought. So then we don't feel lost and we feel like we are realigning ourselves and we feel more like ourselves. We feel like we can actually not just find ourselves, but that in finding ourselves, we are in a better path and trajectory to reach our goals, which with being a mother, that is raising kids. We want to be able to raise our kids authentically to how we want to raise our kids and not an imitation of something else. Because as they grow up, I think that there is a big fear of being a parent to where there's a point in time where your kids are going to figure out who you are. And they also imitate that on the way up. That is their first experience of what an adult is. Mm-hmm. And so if they see this imitation as they're growing, do they feel like they are going to need to imitate whatever role society feels like they need to be put into, falling into peer pressure that's somebody else's idea of what they want you to be, pulling them off course? Or can we authentically be ourselves as a parent, learning from others, but bringing that information into our perspective and our thought systems on how we would live and grow that relationship?
Yeah, I'm still the same Heather that I was 15 years ago, to a degree. Mm-hmm. Like in the depths of my soul, I am still Heather, right? Because my authentic self has stayed true. Becoming a mom didn't change that. And like you just said, there's so many things being thrown at us of what you should do, how you should parent, how you should discipline, whether to do this or that, whatever it is. I think that when we become a mom, we have this idea that like, well, I don't know who I am anymore now that I became a mom. But I think, going back to what you had said earlier, that we're still us. We haven't figured out, maybe with practice it can happen, but I think that oftentimes I hear of moms, and maybe you resonate with this, where they feel lost, they feel like they don't know who they are anymore, but it's because they forget their own voice. They forget who you are authentically and how to project the you that never left. You just maybe slam the door on her face because now you have these expectations to keep this tiny human alive in a way that you're going to have a ton of input from. And then you forget to open the door back up for her to come through and say, yeah. Oh yeah.
And I think that life's challenges, things like this, the growth that we have, it opens up where we are not free. It really shows us where we're not free. And I think when we talk about authenticity, when we are being our authentic self, I heard this definition that was your authentic self is who you would be, the actions you would make, that kind of stuff. If there wasn't a chance of punishment or consequences, it went along those lines. Now, I think authenticity is very freeing because when you get into things like parenting, and I talked about making mistakes earlier, you make those mistakes and you find where you're not free. So we talk about brain patterns a lot. When you find a place where you're not free or you're not authentic, you almost feel as if you're being controlled by somebody else. You're not in control. Mm-hmm. You're being controlled by somebody else. The outcomes, the consequences, whatever it might be. And that fear has you chasing comfort rather than the proper outcome. And when you have fear chasing comfort, you're going to want to feel that comfort in the moment. and you're not going to achieve those goals, and you're not going to be authentic. If you find yourself in a place where you're not feeling like your authentic self, you can look at that brain pattern and say, okay, what is my belief on this? My belief, not the belief that has been influenced by other people, but my belief on this, and really dig deep into that. Because you might feel like you're being pushed off course or controlled by somebody else because their belief has kind of like infested your belief system in a way, right?
Right. And because of this whole, like, I don't want to be outcast by the tribe, so I want to take your thoughts and your input into consideration. But I think that we also live in a society where if you don't take my advice, it's almost like you get offended.
Right. I don't agree with you. I don't like you. And,
right.
And on your where you were going to is that you said that you're the same Heather now as you were before. But I think you're the same Heather now, but far more authentically you. So that's a far more free version of you.
Absolutely.
And that's because in the pursuit of being free and living this authentic life, rather than feeling lost, like you feel like you're found and seen all the time, I think a lot of that is because over time you've seen those distorted beliefs, the belief systems that aren't rooted or fit in reality, the beliefs that when you follow those beliefs, you take the action and it doesn't have the outcome that you want. I think that you've fixed those over time to become more authentically yourself. Those brain patterns have been fixed over time through following that intuition, through learning what you need to learn, putting it into practice, seeing what the outcome of that action is, of practicing that action. And I think that has made you a more authentically you, because you're still you, just more free, more authentic, rather than over time playing a role, an imitation, and then becoming less authentically you and now feeling more lost and more controlled and more distant and more detached and less anchored, right? So I think that's a big part of that, is being the same you, but I can't say I'm the same person because there's been growth there.
Absolutely.
But what would that growth be? I think that growth is authenticity.
But I think that too, it's almost as if, like you said, that I've grown and become more authentically me during my time as a mom. I think it's because I gave myself permission to sift through all of the input that was being given to me as a mom, and giving myself permission to say, this rings true for me as a mom, but it doesn't align, right? When we talk about alignment and misalignment and authenticity, it's almost a giving yourself permission, because I think that oftentimes in life, and this is so multifaceted and can go into so many different categories of our life, where we're constantly seeking almost permission, not even validation, but permission from an outside source when we don't need that. Authenticity is more of like I give myself permission to say, yep, this is me, or I'm happy that works for you, but I'm going to keep that outside.
Right. And how I've seen it, just from me watching, would be when you say you give yourself permission, you give yourself permission to see perspectives and then take those perspectives and use them within your perception. The difference between perspective and perception. Perception is unique to you. I think that there's so many people that see a perspective and they take it immediately as fact.
Yeah.
And it's not fact.
Yes.
It's just a perspective.
Yes. I agree with that. 100%.
And so that permission that you're talking about is permission to either accept this or see it in the way I see it, or be able to reject it and say, this doesn't really work for me. Now, in the way that that's done from me watching you, is that it's put into practice some things aren't put into practice because they're too wild for who you are, or they're, it's just not going to work. But being open enough, having that permission to be open enough to try this, take the action, see the outcome consistently, and is this an outcome that you want, that actually aligns with you? Because when you see the outcome, if you can take an action and you see the outcome enough, you can kind of predict the outcomes of that action you're going to take later on, and you can refine that action to have better and better outcomes. Now, if you can see that, you can predict where you're going to go down the trail, or down the journey of life, right? And so that permission, I think, is really rooted in the idea to be open to perspective.
And I think that is kind of the key definer of finding yourself, of when you feel lost, when you feel like you don't know who you are anymore, giving yourself permission to find out. Give yourself permission to say yes or say no. Is this authentically me, or is it not? Because if it's not, that's okay. Not everything has to align with who you are at your core. And the more that you stop playing this role and trying to fill the shoes of someone else, the more you find out what authenticity is, right?
Right. And I think too, when you're going through this part right here that Heather's talking about, this is a good point that she makes, that you might find yourself in the moment looking for comfort. It might seem like you're almost working for comfort harder than you want to work for your goals. Your goal would be being a good mother, authentically yourself as a good mother. But in the moment, are you searching for validation, or are you searching for the outcome of good actions? Are you working for the comfort of now and making me feel better now, mentally or emotionally? Or am I working towards having the right consistent action that aligns with myself to have good outcomes later on? So it's not just about this feeling. I think when we think about feelings, we can either think about emotional feelings, we can think about like this mental feeling that we get. But I think when you hear people that say, it just didn't feel right, I think a lot of that is more talking about intuition. And so when we're talking about intuition, we are using something that's called discernment. And when we can have good discernment, then we can get a feeling through that. It's not just this emotional feeling or this mental feeling, because if we look at those, if we just look at those are short-term reactions in the moment, and those can lead us to saying, well, momentary comfort feels good, let me chase that, rather than who am I, consistent actions that align with who I am to get the outcome that I want. So the feelings thing is one of those where I don't want it to be in my experience necessarily the current emotional reaction or the mental comfort that I want to feel right now, but this intuition through discernment. That's how we can kind of grow into ourselves. Growing is not comfortable. Growth, just growing, learning.
It can be terrifying.
There's a lot of things that come with that.
And when you talk about the gardener, right? If we go back to that, when the gardener plants a seed, like if the gardener is planting a rose bush, it starts off as this tiny seed that is being covered with dirt, right? And I think that's where a lot of moms feel like they are. They feel like, oh, I have this new life now that I'm a mom. I completely lost myself, and now I planted a new seed, and now I'm in the dark. Well, I don't necessarily think that's true. I think that's your children, right? They get planted and it's dark and it's terrifying under the dirt because you feel alone. Mm-hmm. But as we go through this journey of life, when we search for the light, even though it's scary, there's going to be a time in which you poke through the surface and you're like, oh, there it is. I found it, right? And then, like, I think that breaking the shell of that seed is the hardest part. It's the most intimidating and scary part. And the gardener knows it, but the gardener is like, hey, I got you. Don't worry. I'm going to pull the weeds, but I'm going to leave you there.
Yep. And I think that's a really good point for women going into this stage of motherhood. For me as a dad, I just want to put my perspective on this. Mm-hmm. I said what Heather explained, that like they're really letting us do this. It was a long time of growth for me to realize what was going on in my life. It took a long time to be like, I am a dad. It took a long time for me to realize that I'm a father. I'm a dad. This isn't just a role. It is now who I am. It took years to understand that. And I think in that, in my mind, there was this deep rooted voice that was like, you're not ready. I have a lot of thoughts around, are you ready? The feeling of ready. Ready might not be a feeling. But I think it comes with this idea of this like replacement theory, where sometimes we don't feel like we're ready because we only have so much capacity to build and take on new things. And there's a point where we have to let things go. And I don't think that we feel ready, not because we don't think we can do it, but because we don't think that we can let this go. We don't think that we can let this old self go. We might not even think other people that had access to that old self will allow us to let that part of us go, so then we can grow. It started as a seed. It had to break through the shell and the ground. So much force just to sprout and get up there.
Mm-hmm. By giving itself permission to do so.
And you have to be able to let go of that because you only have so much capacity. And as we grow and we don't feel ready, just realize that that might just be a fear. If you feel ready, that means that there's no fear in growing into this. But if you don't feel ready, it takes action. It takes action to stop the fear. Mm-hmm. Once you take action in a direction and you start moving, it stuffs out the fear. Now, I don't know if that's what women feel like as a nurturing role in the relationship, but I know as a new dad, that's how I felt.
I personally never felt that way, but I think that there's a difference between a mom and a dad, because you don't get to have really a relationship with the baby until it's earthside. Mm-hmm. Whereas as a mom, we get to grow this tiny thing for 9 months if you carry to term, right? We get to form a relationship with a person that we've never met yet. Mm-hmm. And we feel the baby move, and there are a lot of other physical symptoms that come with being pregnant, right? So we form this bond that I'm sure that there are a lot of moms out there who are like, maybe they don't feel ready. I don't know. I'm sure that there are moms that are like, yeah, I'm pregnant. I'm not ready to be a mom yet, for whatever reason that might be, whether it's an early pregnancy, an unplanned pregnancy. But I think that once we become pregnant, and I'm only speaking from personal experience here, you may feel completely different, and that's okay too. I felt ready, but I was terrified because this tiny baby was solely my responsibility to keep alive and to rear as they grow, to go out into the world and be a good steward, right? In whatever capacity that looks like. And when we go back to the whole preface of this, I think that gaining that relationship with that baby, who then grows up to become an adult at some point, you kind of start to feel lost. And I think that you made a good point though too, with like not feeling ready, because I remember I was ready to be a mom. But I remember the moment that our oldest child turned 10, I was not ready to go from a single digit child age-wise to a double digit, because you're only a single digit child for 9 years. And I was not ready for that phase. And it made me question and kind of feel like I didn't know who I was anymore, because I wasn't a mom to a single digit aged child anymore. And they evolve and they grow. And like you had said, that the replacement theory of they shift their identity as they're growing. And then like we all go through different stages as we're growing, and children go through different stages. And I wasn't ready to let that little baby go. And I think that's difficult as a mom, trying to figure out who I am, because I'm not a mom of an infant. I'm not a mom of a toddler. I'm not a mom of an adolescent anymore, or I'm not ready to be a mom of a teenager, right? I think that when our children form their own identities, it makes us question our own. So then that adds even another layer of feeling lost and like we don't know who we are anymore, because our children are growing out of these stages that they're supposed to grow out of.
And it's forcing growth in us.
Yes.
You know, it's really pushing us to grow, because what happens if we don't? If we don't, can we really cultivate growth in them?
Right.
If we don't, can we fulfill our obligations that we have in the role that we're supposed to have? Mm-hmm. If we don't grow, do we make the mistakes that we need to make to be able to have the realizations to grow, to be able to stop those, to be able to shift those brain patterns, that those beliefs that we feel are true but might not be serving us? Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, in closing, I think that if you as a mom feel like you've lost yourself and like you don't know who you are anymore, it doesn't have to be forever. Give yourself permission to grow. Give yourself permission to be authentic. Give yourself permission to sift through all of the noise that comes your way of what you should and shouldn't do, if that's something that you struggle with. Give yourself permission to find out who you are again.
And even if it's not just finding out who you are, you can give yourself permission to realign with who you are.
Yeah.
And grow through that. Grow within alignment of who you are, rather than growing into somebody that somebody else needs you to be, and might not even need you to be. People most likely need you to be who you actually are.
Yes.
And your idea of imitating somebody else because you think that they need you to be that person is a thought process and your perspective. It's probably not theirs. And if you're authentically being yourself, you can show up in a way that people can also understand what to expect of you, how much to expect of you, which is you can do by not running from discomfort in the moment. You can lean into that conflict and say what you need to say so you can be who you actually are.
So, thank you for spending this time with us today. And we appreciate having you here with us, and we love having these kinds of conversations and making people think and challenging beliefs and
brings a different, it's just bringing perspective.
Yep.
And so if you're somebody that feels like I have these brain patterns where I'm attaching beliefs to them, these beliefs are no longer serving me, and I don't really know how to, get back into alignment, or even if you're not sure if your belief systems are really serving you in life, or if you don't feel like your actions are aligned with the person that you truly are, you can work with one of us. We can go through this whole process, and we can teach you how to recognize when your belief systems or your brain patterns aren't serving you anymore. Nice.
The end.